I subscribed to this narrative also, and it justified the chaos. It justified the stress and the pressure that I was always feeling and perpetuating because I felt like I was a superhero. I could just take it. And if I couldn't, well, then what did that mean about me? It meant that I didn't have my act together. It meant that I was weak. It meant that my life would fall apart. There was all this meaning that I attached to this, and it became a part of my identity. And that was really a big shift of mine personally, which is now something I teach.
Welcome to Innovating Education, the podcast where we explore the cutting edge of learning, technology, and leadership in schools. I'm your host, Dr. Riley Williams, and in each episode, we dive into the strategies and innovations that are shaping the future of education. Today, we have an exceptional guest who has dedicated her career to transforming the way educators approach well being, resilience, and mindset in schools. Dr. Jen Rafferty is a dynamic speaker, educator, and founder of Empowered Educator, an organization committed to helping teachers reclaim their energy, passion, and purpose through emotional intelligence and neuroscience based strategies. As a former middle school teacher, Dr. Rafferty experienced firsthand the challenges of burnout and stress in the classroom, which led her to explore the science behind teacher well being. Now she works with educators and school leaders across the country, offering practical, research based tools to help teachers shift from survival mode to thriving. Dr. Rafferty's work is rooted in emotional intelligence, neuroscience, and sustainable self care practices, all essential components for ensuring that teachers stay inspired and empowered in their careers. Through keynote speeches, professional development, and coaching, she's helping to revolutionize how schools support the people who make learning possible. In today's episode, we'll dive into topics like teacher burnout, emotional resilience, and the role of neuroscience in education. Dr. Rafferty will share strategies that educators can use right away to protect their energy, manage stress, and create a sustainable career in education. If you've ever felt exhausted, overwhelmed, or unsure of how to keep your passion for teaching alive, this conversation is for you. Now, let's get started. Dr. Rafferty, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Well, Dr. Rafferty, your journey from being a middle school music teacher to founding Empowered Educator is incredible. It's one thing to recognize a problem in education, but it's another to take action the way that you have. Can you take us back to the beginning? What first inspired you to become a teacher, and what led to the shift into the work that you're doing now?
Sure. Well, teaching to me was definitely more like a calling. It felt like something it was inside of me that needed to be expressed in the music classroom. And I really thought that's how I was going to change the world. I loved it. And at the time around December 2019, I was feeling at the top of my game. I was conducting honors choirs all over New York State. I was presenting nationally about adolescent cognitive development and creating responsive curriculum for the general music classroom, just living my best nerd life. And there was a big shift in my life personally. The end of that month in December of 2019, my husband and I decided we were going to get a divorce. And I moved out of my house with my two kids, who were 5 and 7 at the time, the same weekend the world shut down in March of 2020. So it was a pretty crazy time for me in a lot of ways, as well as the whole world. And everything that I thought I was the day before, I felt all of a sudden like I wasn't anymore. And even singing itself was considered very dangerous at the time. So making music, the thing that always felt safe and at home to me, was fatal. It was something that's what people experienced back then, and it's so interesting to look back on that moment, but it truly led me to ask myself a lot of questions. We were in quarantine, so I needed to really sit at home with my feelings. There were no possibilities for distractions, and I had to decide, who was I? Who did I want to be? And build a bridge to get there. So that fall of 2020, I stayed home to homeschool my kids for what I thought would just be a semester. I started my PhD in educational psychology and really continued to dive into the research. So when the time came to decide whether or not I wanted to go back to teaching, there was just something else calling me. So I resigned from a job that I loved and started Empowered Educator.
Well, before we dive into the deep stuff, let's start with something fun. You talk a lot about the superhero expectations placed on teachers, but if you had to pick one, who is your favorite superhero?
It's funny. I have never been asked this question, and now you are the second person to ask me it this week. It's so interesting. My favorite superhero has to be Sailor Moon. She is my favorite. I loved Sailor Moon. I would wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning to watch it on TV with my friends, so we would get to school, we would all talk about it. Love Sailor Moon.
That's crazy. I like it. Very strategic. I
Yes.
feel that says a lot about you. What is it that stands out about her?
She she was always having her task in the forefront of her mind while still maintaining incredible friendships, having a full high school career, and, was living her best life, always learning. I just loved that show. I loved her.
That actually brings us to what we're here to talk about. Because as much as we admire our superheroes, they're kind of terrible role models for being actual human beings. I think teachers get put on this pedestal, expected to do all these things without breaking, without needing anything for themselves. And you've talked a lot about the superhero narrative in education that teachers are expected to be selfless, tireless, and give 110% at all times. At first, that sounds like a compliment, but you argue that it's actually harmful. Why is that?
Well, when we compare ourselves to these indestructible and immortal beings, we set ourselves up for failure. Superheroes never have to take a day off for themselves. They never need to take any sort of consideration for their own well-being. They're not human. And I think sometimes it's well intended, but it's very dangerous. And in a lot of ways, and me included, I subscribed to this narrative also, and it justified the chaos. It justified the stress and the pressure that I was always feeling and perpetuating because I felt like I was a superhero. I could just take it. And if I couldn't, well, then what did that mean about me? It meant that I didn't have my act together. It meant that I was weak. It meant that my life would fall apart. There was all this meaning that I attached to this, and it became a part of my identity. And that was really a big shift of mine personally, which is now something I teach. One of the certifications I have is actually neuro identity evolution, is how do we shift the way we think about ourselves and the way we shift our identities. I had to I actually gonna rephrase it. I got to let go of that identity because it was actually not serving me anymore. And when we're talking about teachers and in what's highest service of our kids, we need a teacher workforce that understands their humanity, that knows that they are worthy and deserving of things like a bathroom break, that having it all together is not a sign of strength. Vulnerability is. Authenticity is, and having boundaries. Those are all signs of strength, but those are not the messages that we receive. And if we really are talking about changing the next generation, it needs to start with us.
Now, do you think this superhero expectation is something that starts in teacher training, or does it come more from a school culture once they're in the profession?
Oh, it's in the air that we breathe. I mean, it's not just teachers, it's women. And if you are also a mother, like that's a trifecta for everyone who's listening right now of this what Emily and Amelia Nagoski call in their book Burnout, they call it the human giver syndrome. And we're just constantly feeling as if we have to give, 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 and wanting anything for ourselves is deemed selfish. And so it doesn't start when you get into a teaching program or when you get your first job. It starts when you take your first breath. It is in the air that we breathe, which is why instead of pointing fingers outwards to our children saying, "Hey, we're raising a new generation of big thinkers, of kids who are gonna be out of the box. We're gonna teach them the skills that they need to have for things that don't even exist yet." But if we're not providing solid models of what it means to be an empowered human, an educator with agency, then nothing is actually ever going to change.
So we hear a lot about work life balance, but that can feel impossible in teaching. What's a more realistic way for educators to start creating boundaries?
Well, I think the first thing is to get rid of the idea of balance. That to me feels like a very stressful analogy. When I think about balance, I often think of plates spinning and balls in the air and balancing something while I'm standing on something dangerous. It's a very stressful analogy for me. And so I often invite people to consider switching the word to blend, work life blend. And what that allows you to do is move fluidly through some of the places and spaces in your life. There are going to be some seasons in which your family is going to require more time. You're going to want to devote more time to your family. There's going to be time you're going to want to devote more time to your work. And blending gives you permission to explore more possibility without the rigidity of balancing anything. So I think that's the first step. Boundaries, to be honest, is a completely different conversation, that does require a lot of attention. I think, though, part of it, going back to what we were just saying before, is understanding that you deserve boundaries, you're worthy of boundaries, and that when you say yes to things that you really wanna say no to, being aware that you're showing up feeling bitter, resentful, annoyed, angry, impatient, and asking yourself, is that really how you want to show up in this world? And if the answer is no, then you get to make different choices. And I was just actually talking about this with my team this morning. You get to choose two different flavors of discomfort. You're either choosing the discomfort of your current reality of not providing boundaries for yourself and not creating those boundaries, or you're in the discomfort of growth. You choose. And I will tell you, as someone who's constantly growing and has supported and guided and held thousands of educators, the discomfort of growth is far more rewarding.
How do we get past that fear of setting boundaries and how it might make us seem that we feel less dedicated to our students?
So fear is never something you can get rid of. That's the first thing. There's this idea of fearlessness, and that's simply not biologically possible. Our brains are wired for fear. That's what's keeping all of us alive. That's, if you're listening to this, that your brain's doing an amazing job keeping you alive. Congratulations, your fear is working. And when we fight against that biology, you're actually amplifying it. And so fear, recognizing it, that it's part of your beautiful humanness, and it's actually just trying to protect you. That's all it's doing. It's trying to protect you. That fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response that we feel when, and in this example, we're going with boundaries, but it's for anything. When you're wanting to communicate that boundary, your fear is saying, "Hey, wait a second. We've never done this before and survived. This feels really scary. Let's shut it down." And so you don't use your voice. You stay small and you don't end up creating that boundary at all. And then you feel a whole lot of grief about it because you end up staying the same. But according to your brain, same equals safe. And so you're not your fear. You're a person who has a brain, who has fear. And so when you start to objectify the fear as something that's not who you are, but is a part of what you're experiencing, now you can have a dialogue with it. Recognize it. Say, "Hey, I see you. I know, and I predicted that you were going to be here. And I actually don't need you right now because this boundary is not going to kill me. We're actually safe." And this is where, in the work that we do, provide our clients and the beautiful educators that we work with an incredible library of self-regulation strategies to create that felt sense of safety in your body for sustainable change. Because doing it once is not going to create a sustainable change. You need to actually bring your body along for the ride.
So, how do we start shifting that mindset from selflessness to sustainable service?
Well, it's a choice. It's it's a choice. This choice, though, comes with, again, bringing your body along. We think so often that our mind is running the show, and it's only running the show if you let it. You think 65 to 85,000 thoughts every single day. Most of them are fear, ego, and past experiences. That is not fact. Like, those thoughts you think they're not facts. Where your truth is in your body. And so much of what we do, we talk about mindset work, but it's really somatic work. It's body work. It's bringing your body along for the ride so that that fear that you're going to experience isn't that felt sense anymore. It exists in your mind, but your body knows the truth. And so much of us, so much of the time, and so many of us, we've become so dissociated with our body. You know what you feel like when you get stressed. You have a headache, your stomach hurts, your shoulders are all crunched up. And when you're experiencing this, what do? Nothing. You don't do anything. You just keep going because you have to do it for the kids and you have a job to do and you have to show up and you have to take the kids to soccer practice and you have to then show up to the concert at night and grade papers. But it's your body's only way of communicating to you. We're not okay. We need attention. And if you keep ignoring it, it's going to get louder and louder until it's going to decide for you that you're done here, that you need to pay attention to me. And we've all experienced some sort of flavor of that, right? Your back goes out, you have significant illness, you have fatigue. You know, if we are able to foster a dialogue with our body more and more and more, the pathway to what you want becomes so much more clear because your intuition is where your truth is.
So, in your work, you use this really powerful analogy about stress. You compare it to being chased by a bear. And when I first heard that, I was like, okay, yeah, that checks out because teaching is survival mode a lot of the time. You're juggling lesson plans, last minute schedule changes, state mandates, student needs, and about 100 other things like you just mentioned. And somehow you're trying to keep your cool. The way that I understand it is we have the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex, right? The amygdala is responsible for detecting threats, whether it's an actual bear or a chaotic classroom. And when overwhelmed, the amygdala hijacks the brain's fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And instead of being able to solve problems or make clear decisions, the brain shifts into this reactive survival mode. All the while, the prefrontal cortex, which is where we do our best thinking, planning, problem solving, etc., when stressed, the amygdala takes everything over and the prefrontal cortex loses function, which is when teachers start to feel like they can't focus, they can't make decisions, or handle classroom challenges effectively. So, when teachers are in that constant state of stress, whether it's juggling lesson plans, behavioral issues, or new mandates, they're not just overwhelmed. Their brain is literally struggling to function at its best, right?
Correct. Yes. Yes. And we need access to that part of your brain to solve problems, to make good decisions, to advocate for yourself and your students. And again, this isn't something that is is a bad part of our humanity. It's amazing. Like, how incredible is this that this little tiny piece in your brain has the ability to sense threat and keep you alive. And in doing so, shuts off all other parts of your brain that you don't need for survival. That's really cool. But what happens is if we're in this chronic state of survival, not only do we have less access to our prefrontal cortex, there's all of this cortisol and adrenaline, which is some of those stress hormones that are floating through your bloodstream all of the time. And stress gets a bad rap. We need a certain level of stress to get up in the morning. There's a certain level of cortisol and adrenaline running through my bloodstream right now just to have this conversation with you and show up in this way. But when your cortisol cup overfloweth, it has nowhere to go but stay inside your system. And that's a buildup of toxins in your body, which then cause illness and disease. And this is not something any longer that happens in your brain. This is happening in your body, which is why so often when you tell someone, like, calm down, it doesn't work because that's not where the feeling is. thoughts happen in your brain, feelings happen in your body. And without an ability to release stress or release an emotion, it remains trapped. And then it manifests in chronic pain, in chronic disease, in chronic illness. And so this isn't a nice to have skill set. This is an essential piece of the puzzle to maintain a healthy longevity in your career, particularly as educators who are touching the lives of the next generation.
So, what's the first thing a teacher should do when they notice themselves slipping into that stress response in the middle of a school day?
It's a great question. So again, having that conversation with your body, recognizing it when it happens. Oh, that's so interesting. My stomach is tight. That's so interesting. My heart's beating really fast. My ears are getting hot. Those those pieces have to be in place in order for you to do the next step. Because otherwise, we're ignoring it again. We're ignoring all of the times when we're feeling triggered and activated. And it could be something big like a rowdy classroom. It could be an observation from your administrator, but it could also be something subconscious where you're walking through the halls and y a smell sets off some sort of trigger response that you didn't even realize what happened, and all of a sudden, your heart is palpitating, and you don't understand why. You don't have to understand why. You just get to recognize that this is happening and use it as data. And then comes a self-regulation piece. What I always recommend to anybody who's trying this is a very simple box breath. Put your hand to your heart. The reason why you put your hand to your heart is so when you touch your body, there's oxytocin that gets released, which is the love hormone and the trust hormone. If you want to develop and foster more self-trust and self-love, put your hand on your heart. The whole pharmacy between your ears. Use it. Like, put your hand on your heart and you take 3 rounds of a box breath. In for 4, pause for 4, exhale for 4, pause for 4. You do that 3 times throughout your day. And this could be in the car before you leave your parking lot, to get to school. It could be in the bathroom or during lunch, again in your car in the parking lot before you leave, and once again before dinner, 4 times a day. And what that's going to do is teach your body that it is safe to be safe. When we're so jacked up all the time, it doesn't feel safe when we don't have all that cortisol running through our body, and you get to rewire your brain. This is the work that really fundamentally the work that we do in Empowered Educator is teach people how to rewire their brain. So we're not operating on old stories, old programming, old identities that are not serving us anymore, and especially not serving our kids. And those simple breathing breaks are life changing. And I'm saying that not only as a witness to the thousands of educators we've served, but for myself. I never, ever teach anything I haven't practiced myself. And this one simple practice has been a game changer for how I show up in the world.
That is a fantastic strategy that we can take today. I love that. Thank you so much.
So welcome.
So, if a school wanted to take stress regulation seriously, not just as an individual practice, but as part of the school culture, where would they start?
Oh, they would engage with Empowered Educator. And I'm saying that because we are truly the only organization that I know that provides the supports that educators actually need to make cultural shifts. Because there's so many that's out there that's a very check the box. We all know what the social emotional learning standards are, and we can watch a little video, we can have a conversation about kindness, but if we're not actively feeling it, if we're not creating spaces that are safe for people to feel vulnerable, which is not in the faculty room, it is not at the faculty meeting, it is not with your administrator all the time. If we're not providing people with these safe spaces for them to begin to practice having that dialogue with their body, for them to have conversations, honest, authentic conversations with each other, then nothing will ever change. And I am excited about what we're doing, what the team's doing, and how it's growing because I've never seen anything like this anywhere else. And there's a lot of good programs out there, but none that gets to that level of rewiring your brain. because that's what it ultimately comes down to.
So, for administrators, what is an example of one policy change that could make the biggest difference in preventing chronic stress in teachers?
That's a great question. And I'm going to answer this a little bit differently because policy change is loaded. Every community is different. Even the ones that are right next door to each other have different structures, systems, policies, values. It's just different. And so the best way that administrators can make systemic change in their schools is, yes, policy, but before policy, you need to understand that organizations don't change until people change. So you can't slap on a new policy and everyone stays the same and then scratch your head and wonder why it's not working. Organizations don't change until people change. And the only person that you have any agency in changing is yourself. So before any sort of policy takes place, you as the administrator, you're the head domino of your school. You better be practicing this because your impact is dependent on your own personal growth and development. Period. It does not matter how many degrees you collect or how many certifications you have. If you are not growing personally, your impact will always have a ceiling on it. And no one gets into education not to make an impact. And we don't want to limit the impact of our communities. So let's realize that you are limitless and walk the walk.
So, you started Empowered Educator to build a bridge between what teachers need and the support that they're actually getting. What's next for you and your movement?
Oh my gosh, that's such an exciting question. There's two things that are coming to mind right now. We are starting an incredible ripple effect campaign because so many people have experienced such dramatic life shifts in how they show up for themselves, for their families, in their classrooms, with their colleagues. And the question is always like, how do we get this out to more people, Jen? More people need to know about it. So this ripple effect campaign makes it really simple for people to share with teachers they know, administrators they know, parents they know, because we do parent training too. Hey, this is something that was life-changing for me, and I thought this would be something you'd be interested in. Take a look, let's have a conversation. And we truly believe that this grassroots idea of empowered educators empower each other. This really changes the trajectory of everything. So that's something that's coming up right now. And then, of course, we have incredible summer programming.
Can you tell us about the Thrive program and what educators can expect from that?
Absolutely. So we created Thrive because, I was a teacher for 15 years and I have sat through more hours of ridiculous, mindless PD than I can count. And I wanted to create something that was so relevant, so accessible, that really packs a punch. The greatest gift you can give somebody is your attention. And if we could create something that leveraged people paying attention to themselves, that's one of the best places where you can place your attention. So Thrive leverages that in a way where it's a 15-hour course, which is great for PD hours, split up into very small, like 2 to 6 minute chunks of videos that you can watch or listen on a private podcast feed. Because I don't know about you, but I love listening to podcasts. So if I can get my PD that way too, that's amazing. And that's what we've done. And you have 3 months to complete this course. And it comes with live office hours once a month where you get to connect with either me or one of the Empowered Educator coaches for integration sessions, some coaching, and connect with other empowered educators from all over the world. It is so beautiful and the perfect place to start your empowered educator journey.
Let's say a teacher is listening right now and they're on the edge of burnout. They're exhausted, they're overwhelmed, and thinking about leaving the profession. What's the first step you'd recommend that they take?
Do the breathing breaks because your system is so activated, you cannot think straight. And getting to a place where, first of all, you feel safe because some of that, if you don't feel safe emotionally, physically, mentally, intellectually at work, then you need to check that for yourself. You deserve to feel safe. and creating that felt sense of safety so that you can make sound decisions that are aligned, that aren't coming from a place of fear, that's coming from a place of knowing. And again, besides coming into our world, creating and leaning on your community is essential. We are not meant to do this alone. There is an opportunity for you to get rid of or set aside the shame that you might feel about burnout. It is something that everyone has experienced or knows someone who has experienced it. And the more you're visible, the more things start to change. I heard this quote recently and I absolutely love it. We're so afraid to share things that feel really personal. But what's true is that what's personal is universal. We are all experiencing this, and finding that community can be a lifesaver.
So, Dr. Rafferty, if you could leave our listeners with one thing, one message, one lesson, or one piece of advice, what would it be?
So I'll share the thing that's right here on my desk. I look at it every day, and that is enough is a decision, not an amount. And you are the only person that gets to decide whether or not it's enough.
You know what I have on my desk, actually?
What? Tell me.
And it's perfectly. It says, it's braver to be Clark Kent than it is to be Superman. Carry on, warrior.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love it.
Dr. Rafferty, this conversation has been amazing. I know our listeners are going to want to learn more about your work. Where can people find you, connect with you, get involved with Empowered Educator?
Sure. There's a couple places. Instagram at Jen Rafferty _ on Facebook at the Empowered Educator Faculty Room. And of course, the website, you can get a lot of free resources on there to kind of dip your toes in if you're curious and are ready to change your life and your experience in the classroom. empowerededucator.com/resources.
For those of you guys listening, I highly encourage you to check out Dr. Rafferty's TEDx talk. There, she dives in even deeper into the power of mindset, emotional intelligence, and teacher well being. I have it linked in the show notes, and you can find it along with more of her incredible work at, again, www.empowerededucator.com. If today's conversation resonated with you, don't stop here. Please take action, share this episode with fellow educators, subscribe to Innovating Education, and leave us a review so we can keep bringing you insightful conversations that push the boundaries of learning, leadership, and innovation in education. Thank you for tuning in, and until next time, keep innovating, keep learning, and take care of yourself.